Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto inherited an ancient alien bloodline? Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. This is outrageous. A deep voice erupted in a rather small room. The metal on the walls were a metallic yellow with the lights built into the ceiling. A round table stood in the center of the room with 10 chairs surrounding it. Plates and cups were scattered across the table with 10 occupants sitting on said chairs. One of which just abruptly stood from his chair in rage. The source came from none other than Hyas Grandom. The other occupants, 3 ultra grunts and 6 elites, looked down at their plates when the outburst was released. The others knew it was only a matter of time before Hyas's head exploded. The other officers looked up at their commander when he looked at the others in his division. Do you realize what just happened? Hyas shouted as he brushed the contents of the table onto the ground. The grunts in the room flinched while the other elites looked at him in question. Those heretics down there found something. They found the truth and we forced them to destroy it. Recently, Hyas's division had been forced onto the front lines, taking the bulk of the fire from heretic forces controlling a Forerunner facility, while his commander flanked and entered the Forerunner station. Soon after the station was destroyed, and along with it, the secrets to the truth behind the Prophet's teachings. How are you sure, Hyas? How are you so certain that's what they found? One of the more bold elites asked. Hyas looked at him in what looked like pure anger, but to their surprise a much more quiet voice was produced. Before the station was destroyed I was able to hack one of the terminals and I found flaws, gaps, in the Prophet's teachings. Not everything they have been telling us is true. Hyas said as he looked to each of his men. Unlike most in the Covenant who look at him like he was crazy and call him a heretic, his men responded with nods. Hyas's men have been with him since he was first elected from his men to take this position. After proving himself in combat, Hyas was offered to command both his division, the Burning Blade, and a much smaller unit of hunters and jackals, which are not included in the Special Operations Unit. Hyas quickly changed that and trained and treated both Special Ops units and his smaller unit of jackals and hunters the same. Soon the jackals and hunters of the 967th Support Unit were soon merged into Hyas's Burning Blade division. This was unheard of in the Covenant and most looked down upon him for allowing support units like the Jackal and Hunter into the Spec Ops, but due to Hyas's intense training these flaws were quickly wiped out. Now, these units are essential to Hyas's new form of tactics and strategies and since all other Spec Ops units refuse to bring in any Jackals or Hunters, none can obtain Hyas's new form of fighting. I was also given something, Hyas said as he placed an audio chip onto the table. His men looked at the chip in question. It came from one of the heretics. Truth that there are flaws behind the Prophet's words. I see. What are your orders, Commander? Bress asked. Bress was his second in command and was completely loyal to Hyas. Hyas stepped away from the table and towards the window. The outside world greeted Hyas with the same blackness as always. The air in the room was tense as the officers awaited their orders. The prophets are becoming too problematic and refuse to see what they are pushing everyone towards. Hyas said as he looked back towards his men. Engage operation. Purify. XXXXX. That was a close one. Yugana said with a smile as he beat one of his men in a tactical board game in his quarters. Yugana's, along with Hyas's and Drang's, forces are all stationed on board the massive carrier ship named Golden Light, due to its strange gold coloring that stood out from the standard purple, and are currently on leave for a short time before they are called back into duty. Well, I almost got you. The young soldier said after a sigh. Yugana grinned at the young elite. True, but, almost, won't win battles now will they? Yugana asked as the younger soldier twitched from his commander's comment, but then a hand was placed on his shoulder. Do not worry young one. You will get better in time. Thank you sir. It was a pleasure, the younger soldier started, but was interrupted when Ultra Grunt burst into the room breathing heavily. What do you need? Yugana asked. The grunt took a few more seconds to breath before stating what he saw. There is an uprising amongst our forces. There's fighting all over this ship and the surrounding escort ships. There is heresy afoot. The grunt shouted. The two elites violently stood from the table. Hyas. XXXXX. Sakura, are you okay? Please answer us. A voice shouted as Sakura was shaken awake by the pair of hands that pressed against her. Sakura slowly opened her eyes to see Ino looking at her with tear-stained eyes and smile on her face. As Sakura looked around her Tenten, Kakashi, and Kurenai came into view. Sakura also noticed that she was no longer inside the cave, but atop the cliff that they had battled on earlier. You're awake. Sakura then began to stand, but was about to fall over when Ino and Tenten caught her. Wah, what happened? Sakura asked. Silence soon followed as everyone looked towards the ground. Sakura then realized what happened and at the same time remembered her final moments before blacking out. Tears slowly began to fall from Sakura's eyes in realization. Sakura released herself from her two friends' grasp as she turned around towards the cliff. You think that you'll get away with this? Sakura thought as she slowly limped towards the edge as the gray skies began to build up. As Sakura made her way towards the cliff's edge, a drizzle began to fall from the heavens. All watched as she made her way. Sakura stopped on the cliff's edge only to be greeted by a black city. Burnt and destroyed by a war no one will know of. Nobody will ever know the reason for the deaths of so many countless lives, but there was one thing for certain. Sakura looked up into the gray heavens above as the rain became extremely heavy. But, why is it that I can't believe that? Believe that you would kill thousands of people without a purpose. Naruto, Sakura thought as she continued to look up into the darkening sky above. Please, stay safe. XXXXX. Forerunner, a distant voice said softly. Naruto's eyes slowly opened to the feeling of a warm fire pressing against his body in the dark sky above. Watch Forerunner, the voice said again as Naruto lifted himself up only to see the fire and smoke rising from over the side of a cliff. Naruto slowly stood from the prone position he was in. Once Naruto was standing, he proceeded to walk to edge of the cliff. Naruto was baffled by what he saw. Konoha, his birthplace, was in flames. Screams could be heard from the flaming city below as tentacles could be seen moving throughout the city as well as infected shinobi. Watch, Forerunner, as I infect the ones closest to you. The voice said once more as a large flood creature rose up in front of Naruto. It was none other than the Grave Mind. Naruto's eyes turned to a bright blue color as he looked back at the almost immortal flood being in front of him. You know the outcome of what is happening in front of you, do you not? The Grave Mind asked. Naruto stared back in silence. Naruto knew very well what this meant. Just like any other sentient being that is infected by the flood, the Grave Mind absorbs the knowledge of the infected being and learns from the unfortunate being that is captured. So, in this case, the Grave Mind will have the knowledge of the jutsu that the shinobi knew. The only thing that could be close to topping this would be. The grave started as large green tentacles began to surround Naruto. Naruto looked at the green worms and back to the Grave Mind, you. Just as the Grave Mind said the final word, the worms that surrounded Naruto shot closed at blinding speed, shinobi speed. Then, everything went black. XXXXX. Naruto shot up from his bed in a cold sweat. Naruto was breathing heavily as he looked around him only to see his chamber as he left it. Naruto sighed as he began to settle down from what he just witnessed. It's true, Naruto thought to himself as he stood up from his bed and over to the balcony atop his tower that loomed over the ruins of a once great city. The heavy rain and warm temperature continued to beat down onto the planet relentlessly as the rain made Naruto's hair wet. If the Grave Mind managed to get a hold of a shinobi, then it can unlock the potential of chakra, but even worse. Naruto looked up into the sky with his bright blue eyes. The clouds were dark and fill with sadness. Single quote. If it were to capture me, then it would have the complete knowledge of the Forerunner technology that has melded to the shinobi chakra structure. After a few moments of Naruto thinking to himself, in the rain, light appeared from the balcony door behind him. Creator, please come in or you will catch a disease. Light said in the softest tone that one like itself could make. After another moment, Naruto turned towards the floating ball and with a troubled look on his face. Light, prepare an excavation team. Naruto said. Light was confused. It has only been a week since he came back and the only thing Naruto has done since coming back is meditate, eat, and sleep. What is he up to? Whatever for? Light asked curiously. A backup plan, Naruto said as he walked past his confused friend. A backup plan for what? XXXXX. Highest, on the left. Bress shouted as a blue plasma bolt erupted from the end of his plasma rifle. The blue bolt hit a grunt that was holding a Type 52 guided munitions launcher, or more commonly known as a plasma launcher cannon. Essentially, the shoulder-fired launcher fires up to 4 plasma grenades that guides themselves towards the locked-on target until finally sticking itself to the target and exploding. Thank you, Langu. Move it up. Highest shouted as a black-coated hunter shot past the two and straight through a door that was locked. Good. Now everyone move through the door. Several more hunters quickly moved through the door and was soon followed by elites, grunts, and jackals. After everyone moved through the door, Highest and Bress soon threw themselves into the mix. Highest immediately slammed his body into cover and quickly glanced over the wall to find himself looking down onto one of the docking stations of the massive ship. His troops were firing down onto the grunts and elites that were taking care of the banshees and spirit drop ships. The enemy troops were scrambling to take cover as Highest's troops fired everything they had down at them. Highest looked down at the troops only to see the enemy not firing back at all. Highest was confused. These men are special operations. Why are they not firing back? Hold your fire, Highest shouted. Highest's men all stopped firing at the same moment when the order was given out. After a few seconds of silence, an elite stepped out from behind one of the banshees. He was obviously the lieutenant and commander of the area. Are you the one known as Highest? The elite shouted in question. Who's asking? Highest returned. My name is Polaris and my 1078th Special Operations Wing and I have been docked here for some time. Polaris said. Your point? Highest asked with impatience laced in his voice. My men and I have heard about your rebellion and heresy and wondered if we could jump aboard. Polaris asked. Highest was confused even more now. He looked at Polaris's men as they all came out from behind cover with their OLG orbital landing gear and their pilot gear on. Their banshees and spirit ships were also made out of the same gold material that covered carrier and the surrounding escorts. Why would you want to join us? Highest asked as his men lowered their weapons. The prophets, they are lying, aren't they? Polaris asked. Highest nodded. I thought so. You are not the only one who has fought against the heretics and had their beliefs wavered. We once had to board a Forerunner structure and fight against the heretics amongst the beautiful engineering around us. We learned much from the heretics' words. Polaris explained. Highest nodded his head in understanding. I understand. You are allowed to join us under one condition. Highest said. And what's that? Polaris asked. You are to follow my orders and report to only me from now on. Not the prophets. Not the other heretics. Only me, Highest said. Polaris looked at him and smiled. Yes, Commander. I will follow your orders. Polaris said as he pressed his arm to his chest and bowed. The other men of Polaris's division did the same. Good. Now tell the other men of your wing to do the same throughout the ship. After that, get into your vessels and support any of the escort ships that need the help of your landing forces. Tell me when all of the escort ships are secure. Highest ordered. Polaris nodded in understanding. Yes, Commander. It will be done. Polaris said as Highest turned and ran off. The rest of his troops following close behind. Little did Highest know, but the situation that just unfolded before him was unfolding everywhere else. The special operations troops that had come in close contact with the heretics and Forerunner technology have been turning code and joining Highest's rebellion against the Prophet and the commanding officer aboard the ship. Yugana, I'm coming for you, Hayase thought as he and his unit fought their way to the bridge of the ship. XXXXX. This planet, Naruto said as he stepped off his ship and onto the muddy surface. This planet was once a thriving Forerunner planet, but was long since abandoned by your ancestors to the corners of space. Light said, now this planet is a Sanghali colony. Naruto looked out across the vast swamplands before him. Barely any trees stood except for the random build-up of trees that signaled an island. These islands were barely enough to hold a single ship, let alone an excavation crew. Naruto could build a platform, but being quiet was his main focus. Naruto did not want any Covenant space vessel to see his plans. Seeing as how they were now deep in Covenant-controlled space. Creator, have you heard of the relayed message of your return? Light asked. Naruto was quiet for a moment. Yes, I have, Naruto replied. Well, the prophets are saying you're a fraud and if they ever come in contact with you then they'll attack you on sight. Light said. So, in a sense they have declared war on me and all other sentinels. Naruto said as other Forerunner vessels landed on other islands around them. Possibly. Their leaders were not very clear on exactly what they would attack. Their religion worships your artifacts, but they say you're not a Forerunner. It makes sense once one thinks about it. Light said. If I would not have been made out as a fraud then the entire Covenant would have turned coat and betrayed their prophet leaders. It's the only way to keep them under their rule. Naruto said. Exactly. The prophets know more than what they let on. Light said. Agreed, but let's focus on the task at hand. I want everything to be done as quietly as possible. If found out, I want anti-air batteries and evac ships waiting on constant alert. Also, Naruto started, but was finished by Light. You want the scuttle protocol in effect as well? Light said. Naruto nodded. As you wish, but I must warn you that we are not able to fight the full force of the Covenant Armada at this point. Our power plants are still in repair across the galaxy and this will only further delay plans for a full repair of our other facilities. Light said. I know, but this information must be found, no matter the cost. Naruto said. Light looked at Naruto a moment with confusion. What was it he was looking for that he didn't know about? Light knew that there was a research facility here buried somewhere in this area, but nothing on record looked to be of any use. What is it you're looking for anyway? Light asked. You will see, in time. Naruto replied. XXXXX. Is everyone ready? Hayase shouted as several honor guard elites were seen crouching against the wall as the charge was ready and planted on the door. Let's do it. Blow it. The door was blown inwards, sending smoke all over the hall and the room on the other side. Blue bolts could be seen firing past Hayase's men as Hayase was first to dive through the smoke, followed by the elites. The front elites that followed Hayase into the smoke all pulled out energy swords, as well as Hayase. The back elites all were holding Type 51 plasma rifles. On the other side of the smoke Hayase clashed swords with Yugana. The fight around them was point-blank range as more elites from Hayase's brigade stormed into the room. Tell me, why are you turning coat like this? You were my most valiant commander. What is going through your mind? Yugana asked as Hayase jumped back and clashed with his commander once more. Hayase pushed Yugana back and attempted to slash out vertically, but Yugana sidestepped and jabbed at Hayase. Hayase brought up his sword and locked it between his and Yugana's sword. Because, the prophets are lying to us. To everyone, they want to activate all of these halos, but do you know what they do? Has anyone actually figured out what their purpose is? Hayase asked as they unlocked their swords and jumped backwards. Let's take this to a more private location. Shall we? Yugana said as he turned and bolted out of one of the side doors. Hayase was close behind, following his ex-commander into a training room that was used to train new recruits in how to use the energy sword. Hayase stared at Yugana's back as he knew his old commander was thinking. Yugana quickly turned and swiped his sword towards Hayase, who quickly parried and elbowed Yugana away. Yugana stumbled backwards before pulling out a plasma pistol and pointing it towards Hayase. Hayase quickly jumped behind one of the training dummies while green plasma bolts shot past him. The prophets, they say if we succeed in activating the halo rings then we will all be blessed into the great journey. Yugana shouted. Hayase shook his head from behind the training dummy. Hayase wanted to convince his old commander of the treacherous ways of the prophets. The great journey is not real. No matter how much we believe it to be true, it will always be false. Those halo rings that the prophets say are holy are not portals to this great journey. Hayase said as he tried desperately to talk his master out of fighting and into joining him. Yugana would make an excellent senior commander. How do you know this? How am I supposed to believe any of this? Yugana asked as Hayase shot out from the other side of the dummy. Yugana fired a few plasma bolts towards Hayase, but said soldier managed to slice the pistol in two and kick Yugana backwards. Hayase looked down to see a glowing blue ball beneath him. Hayase quickly jumped backwards, but the force of the plasma grenade flung him into the wall behind him. Yugana was also flung away from the blast. The heretics that we fight against have told us that the information that they have brought up, from what little they can access and piece together, has relayed that those relics are pacification units. Pacification, a heavy word. What would it be used for? Hayase said between coughs as he stood up. Yugana also stood up and stared at Hayase for a moment before shaking his head. That's not enough to stop me from believing in the prophets. This pacification that you continue spill out is the great journey that our leaders believe in. Yugana shouted back. Hayase sighed, as he now knew that he had to bring out the big guns if he wished to get Yugana on his side. There is one other thing that the heretics have been searching for. Hayase said, as his tone became that of complete seriousness. What are the heretics looking for? Yugana asked. It seems that there is still a Forerunner, a real Forerunner, still alive somewhere in the galaxy. Hayase said with a deep sigh. Yugana was quiet. A real Forerunner. Alive, the very one that built all of these machines and wonders that we have been collecting. After a few more moments of silence, Yugana began to talk. Impossible. How do you know this? Yugana asked. Hyas knew this question was coming and prepared for it. Hyas pulled out an audio file and tossed it to Yugana. What's this? It's the very file that the heretics glimpsed before they were completely forced out of the Forerunner system. Play it and you will know. Hyas said as Yugana looked back down at the file. After clicking the play button, a crackling could be heard over the speaker before a faint sound could be heard over the static in another language that could not be recognized. At the end of the audio log, the crackling of static returned and the log ended. What did it say? I could not understand it. Yugana asked. The words were as followed. Purpose has been restored. The rebuilding process has begun. New energy fuels the rebuilding. Life returns to our ancient halls. The body is whole, but the mind is young. The creator is coming. Hyas recited. Yugana had a shocked look on his face. Ever since that last message was relayed, we have not been able to access any files of any sort. Even your precious prophets are finding it challenging to steal technology from him. Yugana asked, still in shock of what he just heard. Hyas looked at Yugana intently before replying. The creator has returned and we will seek him out and find out the true purpose of these halos. Hyas said. Yugana didn't know what to believe at this point. Should he believe Hyas and join him? Or should he stick to his old beliefs? Hyas looked at Yugana as he dropped his sword and looked at his hands. Yugana, join me and help us find the creator. Yugana looked at Hyas as he outstretched a hand to him. Yugana looked at the hand and smiled. You better be right, or we will be in deep shit with the prophets, Commander. Yugana said as he clasped his hand to Hyas's. Indeed, but the heretics have already relayed this message to the prophets, but they said that, if he exists, that this being is an imposter and should be treated as someone who somehow stolen the Forerunner's power for his own gain. Hyas explained as they walked back to the bridge. As they entered, Yugana's men could be seen dead or captured. The bridge is clear, sir. Bress said as he saluted with a fist to his chest. Very good. Yugana has decided to join us in our search. Yugana, get in contact with your men. See if any of them want to join. If not, kill the rest. Hyas said. Yugana nodded and walked away. Polaris, are the escort ships secured? Hyas asked as he pressed a finger against his ear. In his ear was a tiny headset that allowed only him and the commanders of certain platoons to talk. Yes, Commander. All escort ships are secured. Polaris said. Just as Polaris said this, Yugana walked up to Hyas. All of my men have decided to join you. All fighting has ceased on board all of the other vessels. Yugana said. Hyas walked over to the admiral's chair and sat down in it. Good. Looks like the operation was a success. Bress, Yugana, Polaris, tell the men to get into positions as we are on a search mission. Let's find this creator and the true purpose of the halos. Hyas said. Yes, sir. Everyone in the room, as well as Polaris over the mic, said in unison. XXXXX. They think that I'm contained, long since cast into the shadows of the Forerunner's belly, but I grow more powerful each day. One day I will break away from this prison, and when they do, Naruto, you and every intelligent species in this galaxy will be consumed. You know that this day is coming, young Forerunner, and when it does, you, and the entire galaxy, best be prepared. XXXXX end. Okay, so it's been a while since I last updated and to be honest I'm surprised that I did, but lately I just have wanted to write. Please, also note that I'm not able to upload every week or have a time frame when the next chapter will appear, so see this a random treat for all those still reading. D-close, that's what Hyas feels like as he looked out of the bridge's front window, out into the black nothingness of space. Hyas could sense that they were close to wherever the creator is. There are so many things that he wants to ask him and know about him, but what if the prophets were right? What if this person is just a fake? Hyas shook his head as he looked down at the handheld terminal and growled as he tossed it onto the table next to him in frustration. There are so many unknowns about everything. The burning blade was now on their way towards a planet deep in Covenant-controlled space. The heretics seem to believe that there is a facility there that has long been forgotten by the prophets that still houses important data on the halos. Hyas shook his head as he pressed his fingers to his forehead before standing and walking towards the exit. Bress looked up at Hyas with worried eyes. I'm fine, just need a walk. Hyas said reassuringly as the door shut behind him. Hyas continued to walk down the endless corridors of the ship before reaching the observation deck to the mess hall. Hyas stopped and looked out over his troops. Hyas smiled at the sight before him. Different species that made up his unit were smiling and laughing together. Grunts, jackals, elites, and hunters, all talking and communing without separation. Is this what Hyas was fighting for? He wanted this being the friendship between species and the trust to lean on one another. It's funny, isn't? A voice said from behind him. Hyas turned to see Yugana leaning against the window overlooking the mess hall. What is? Hyas asked. Yugana nodded towards Hyas's men with a smile. How creatures from different species get along so well. Never before have I seen this. Yugana said as he maneuvered himself so he was facing Hyas's men. On every ship I've ever been on you would see all the different species separated from one another, but not here. It's amazing, isn't it? I wonder why they get along so well. Hyas asked. Yugana shook his head and patted Hyas's shoulder. It's because of you, Yugana said. Hyas was surprised. Me, Hyas responded. Of course. You're the one that made these soldiers feel as if they had family. If I remember correctly, these men of yours were taken in from the streets and orphanage volunteer groups. You included, Yugana said. Hyas sighed as he looked at his men. I sure do have a history with them, don't I? Hyas asked with a smile of his own. You sure do. You brought up these soldiers from the very beginning, and to accept the support units so well completely blows me away. I don't know what you did, but it seems to work. Yugana said. Just gave them the respect they deserve. I respect all of them equally, no matter the job. Hyas said. Yugana nodded, but looked over at Hyas when he stood up and pressed his finger to his ear. What is it? Okay, I understand. I'll be right up, Hyas said before turning to Yugana. We just entered the space around the planet. Prepare the men. XXXXX. Creator, we have a situation. Light said as he followed Naruto down a pitch-black hallway. But, to them, it was bright as day of the night vision that was inside Naruto's helmet. I know, are the AA batteries prepared? Naruto said. Yes, but why are they here? How did they find us? Light pondered. The Covenant knew this facility was here, but marked it off as useless. No new technology came from this site so they abandoned it. Naruto stated. Then what makes you think that whatever you're looking for is still here? Light asked. Because, Naruto started as two CSs forced open a door in front of them. Inside there was a large terminal on the opposite side of the small room. A blue ball with various symbols covering the outside in a random pattern sat at the terminal's base. Only I can access this terminal. Light, command the CSs and give me cover while I extract the information. Let me know if it's the Covenant or heretics. Do not open fire until we find out. Naruto ordered. How long will it take you? Light asked. This information isn't recorded anywhere that can be accessed by him, meaning it was something either really important or dangerous. I don't know, Naruto said as the thick wall of glass slid up into the ceiling. Understood. We will cover you, Creator. Light said. XXXXX. Hyas entered the bridge of his ship with all of his upper staff standing at attention. What's the problem? Why haven't we began the descent? There seems to be a ship sitting above the target area. Yugana stated as Hyas walked up to the table and viewed the hologram. The planet sat beneath 3 ships. A large cruiser and 3 smaller destroyer ships. One of the small destroyer ships seemed to be inside the atmosphere of the planet. Are they Covenant? Hyas asked. No, they seem to be raiders in search of artifacts to sell. Bress commented. Hyas sighed as he put his hand to his face. What are your orders? Hyas leaned against the table and looked at the hologram in front of him. Was the information on the halos really here? If not and Hyas engages the raiders then this will all be for naught. A senseless sacrifice of men and weapons. Something that Hyas doesn't have a lot to lose. If those heretics gave him false information then there would be hell to pay. Stay outside of their scanners and wait. Let's see if they'll leave soon. Hyas said. Why not engage the raiders and take them out? They don't have many ships. We could easily. Bress began to say. No, there is no need to attack them and lose men for no reason. We'll wait for a short time and see if they find anything. Hyas said. Bress nodded and saluted. Hyas knew of Bress's past with raiders, but the protection of his men comes first before petty vengeance. XXXXX. They seem to be raiders, sir, but another group of ships have entered the planet's space. Light said as Naruto scanned through the terminal in front of him. Naruto stopped and turned towards Light. Raiders. Are they here to scavenge what's left of this facility? Naruto asked. Indeed, but the second group of ships that came don't seem to be engaging the raiders. Light said. They aren't Covenant then because they have a policy to shoot down raiders on sight. Heretics maybe, possibly merchants, Naruto suggested. The ships are heavily armed so it couldn't be merchants. The more likely possibility are heretics. Light replied. Naruto nodded and turned back to the terminal behind him. The screen went dark, meaning it was locked. Naruto turned and walked towards the door. I'm taking direct control of this matter, Naruto said before exiting the room. XXXXX. This is Unit 4. We've entered the facility, Commander. All's clear, and Sanghaili said into his suit's headset. Keep going until you find anything useful. The other teams will continue to try and find an entrance. Another Sanghaili responded via headset. We're moving more troops to your entrance as well. Good luck. Understood, the elite said before turning on his suit's flashlight. It was pitch black inside the underwater facility. Since the structure of the building was built under the vast swamp-like ocean above, the only entrances were the ones on the small islands that dotted the landscape. Looks like we're the only ones that managed to get in so far. Hey, that means more pay for us then. One of the other elites shouted. The first elite sighed and looked around at his squad. 12 Sanghaili elites with a combination of carbines and plasma rifles all looked around at the Forerunner facility. 15 jackals, most with shields and plasma pistols, 2 others with beam rifles, all stared at him. They all wore brown armor in some sort of fashion to distinguish who they were allied to. I suppose, but something doesn't feel right, the squad leader said. A swift pat on the back from one of the elites calmed his nerves somewhat. Relax. This place has been deserted for the last couple of years. This should be an easy grab and run. The squad leader nodded in return. You're right. Let's get moving. The squad leader looked around the large entrance room and saw 3 hallways. Okay, we are going to split up into 3 groups. XXXXX. This room's empty, one of the raider Sanghaili said as he exited one of the rooms, 2 jackals following suit. The leader turned behind him and another group exited another room. Nothing. The Covenant did a good job of clearing this place out, the leader said as he continued down the hallway a bit and saw an open door. Hey, did anyone check this room yet? No, not yet, one of the Sanghaili responded. The leader looked into the pitch-black room and slowly walked in, but once he was fully inside the door quickly shut behind him. Shit, the leader shouted as he turned and banged on the door. Hey, is anyone there? Can you guys hear me? But there was no response from the other side. The leader quickly turned and pointed his carbine around the room. The room was more like a hallway in that it was narrow and long. The elite's flashlight couldn't reach the end of it. The elite heard something at the end of the hallway. A footstep maybe. The elite pointed his carbine down the hallway and suddenly realized that his hands were shaking. Keep it together. This place has been abandoned for years. It's probably just an animal. Another footstep broke the mind-warping silence, then another. The flashlight on the suit of the elite began to flicker before dying completely. The only light coming from the screen on his carbine. Who's there? The elite shouted as he began to tremble even more. Never has he felt this way before. A blue flicker of light broke the darkness in front of him. He aimed his trembling carbine towards where the blue light flickered. Show yourself. A light was suddenly turned on just above the raider, illuminating the area around him. What's this? Then a thing stepped out of the veil of darkness. It wore a gray and blue cloak with a helmet with black holes where the eyes should be. The thing remained silent as it simply stared at the elite. Finally, the elite realized that the thing standing in front of him was not going to attack him. What are you? Some sort of sentinel? Leave this place. The cloaked figure commanded. The Sangheili jumped slightly after hearing it talk. It knows our language. Leave. Tell me what you are, then I'll consider it. The elite said in defiance. The cloaked thing remained silent for a moment. Maybe it was debating its possibilities. It didn't look to be armed with any weapon that the raider could see. I'm a forerunner, it said calmly. The elite stared at the shorter cloaked figure in question. A forerunner? A real forerunner? No, it can't be a forerunner. The prophets warned all species that a fake forerunner has arrived to guide us away from the great journey. No, you're a fake. We were told of this. Everyone was. The raider shouted in defiance. Even if they are raiders, they still believed in the great journey. I'll warn you one last time. Leave this place, the figure demanded. The elite began to laugh now. Oh no, there's no way that I'm going to turn down an opportunity like this one. The price on your head is worth a fortune. The elite shouted. Said elite began to fire his weapon into the cloaked figure, but the green bolts were simply absorbed by the shield that surrounded it. If that is your wish, the cloaked figure responded before it lifted its hand towards the elite. Its hand began to glow blue and energy could be seen entering the thing's hand. Die. XXXXX. Sir, we've got a problem. Bress shouted. Hyas turned towards his second in command. What's going on? Hyas responded. We're picking up comm chatter from the raiders inside the facility. It seems that they are under attack. Bress said. Patch me through. Hyas ordered. Bress nodded and typed in a few commands onto the keyboard on the table in the center of the bridge. Only static was heard at first, but then, after some tweaking from Bress, the comms were online. Sir, we are under fire from an unknown enemy. A Sangheili shouted. Intense fire, explosions, and screams could be heard in the background. We need evac now. We are trying our best right now, but the destroyer in orbit has been destroyed by a heavy turret. The commander of the raiders responded. Can you describe the enemy for us? We're flying blind up here. All I know is that they aren't any type of sentinels we've ever encountered. Shit, get that out of the. The Sangheili shouted over the incoming fire, but was cut off by a loud explosion. Bress turned to Hyas, who was now gripping the table tightly. What do you think? I don't know, but that very well could be the creator down there. If not, Hyas said before trailing off. You aren't seriously thinking of going down there. Yugana said before he walked up to the commander. What other choice do we have? The sentinels are protecting something of great value down there. If it's not the creator, then it's information worth protecting. Bress shouted. Sir, Polaris said, but was quickly blocked out by the arguing elites. Then we should move forward with caution. Commander, please, this is suicide. If we go down there then we'll get slaughtered. Yugana argued. Sir, Polaris pushed a little harder, but, again, was pushed out. Then we'll slip in past the sentinels and the raiders. Find what they're protecting and slip out. Bress exclaimed. Sir, Polaris shouted over the two arguing elites, finally getting Hyas's attention. What's the problem? Hyas asked. We have intercepted a transmission from one of the colonies below. It seems a Covenant force is making their way here now. Polaris said. Damn it, the colonists must have warned the Covenant that something is going on. Hyas elaborated. What are your orders? Bress asked. Hyas squeezed the table one last time before pushing himself away from the table. Bress, ready 2 of our fastest hunters and elites. Be ready in 5, Hyas said before walking towards the exit. Bress smiled a bit and saluted. Yes sir. XXXXX. Are the raiders in the facility dealt with? Naruto said as he typed away at the terminal. No, there seemed to have been a large contingent of raiders moving into the facility when the fighting started. Most of the raiders are held up near the entrance while smaller groups are scattered about. Light explained. Naruto stopped typing and turned towards Light. Anything else? There is a heretic cruiser entering the airspace. What's their objective? Unknown. Naruto sighed deeply and looked up at the ceiling. Let them through, but if they take any action towards us then begin firing on them. XXXXX. It's a bloodbath down there. Bress exclaimed as he saw the video feed of the battle on the surface. Forerunner platforms hovered above the swampy water with large cannons sitting on top of them. Presumably those were the AA cannons that took down the destroyer that was now burning and slowly sinking into the murky water below. Raiders were taking cover behind whatever they could find on the small islands and firing at the CSs on the hovering platforms. Do we have confirmation on how the raiders got in? Hyas asked over the comms channel. There seems to be an opening on one of the small islands. I'm sending the coordinates to you now. Polaris said. Hyas soon got the information and immediately sent it to the pilot. All right guys, I want this to be quick and easy. Run in and follow my lead. We are looking for this creator, or any information that may help us in our search for the truth. Hyas said. A collective of, yes sirs, and, Rogers, came from his men as a green light could be seen above the drop area. Okay, let's move. The hunters went first, then quickly followed by Hyas, Breeze, and the other elites. The 6 men hit the ground running as a beam rifle round flew overhead. Hyas and his men were quickly inside the underground facility and running down the steps into the base. Lights on, Hyas ordered. Everyone turned on their lights, except the hunters, and continued at an almost sprinting pace into the entrance room. As soon as they reached the room, at least 12 raider elites stood in front of them, shocked at what they saw. What the? One of the raiders said in shock, but as soon as he said these words, one of the hunters smashed him to the side and continued running towards the center hallway. Keep moving. Don't stop, Hyas shouted. The raiders quickly realized what was happening and began shooting at Hyas and his troops, who began returning fire immediately. Once Hyas reached the hallway, a door opened off the side and an elite pulled him into the room. Hyas was thrown into the far wall with a loud thud, knocking the breath from his lungs and dropping his plasma rifle. Even being slightly dazed from the shock, Hyas lunged to the side as an energy sword sliced into where he once stood. Hyas looked up and saw a massive elite, at least 1 foot taller than he, charging towards him, energy sword in hand. Hyas dodged the initial slash and punched the raider in the stomach, but this did little to deter the massive body of flesh. Said body of flesh went on to headbutt Hyas in the face, making Hyas staggered backwards from the sheer force of the blow. The massive raider then kicked Hyas in the chest, sending him into a bench on the far side of the room. Hyas shakily stood up from the bench and looked up to see the massive elite bring its sword up above its head to end his life. Hyas was about to react when a leg was smashed into the side of the massive elite's head. Said elite staggered to the side and was then rippled with carbine rounds at close range. The rounds smashed into the elite's shield until the shield burst from taking too much damage. After the shield had been cracked, Hyas's savior pulled out an energy sword of his own and rammed said sword into the raider's chest. After a small struggle, the massive elite died and slumped to the floor after the energy sword was released. Hyas looked over at the elite that just saved him and saw a special operations elite saluting back. So elites are easy to recognize due to their helmets covering up their entire head, but this elite was smaller than most elites. Hyas sighed and walked up to the obviously young elite. Thank you. I owe you, son, but let's get moving. We don't have the manpower to stay and fight. The So elite nodded and followed Hyas out into the hallway to see his men aiming down the hallway. Bress walked up to Hyas and gave him a once-over. You okay? Yeah, got my ass kicked, but should be fine thanks to this guy. Hyas said before pointing towards the So elite. Bress glanced at said Sanghaley and gave the elite a grateful nod for helping Hyas. So, where's the raiders? I thought they'd be chasing us. Just as those words left Hyas's mouth, a fierce firefight could be heard behind them. Meaning the raiders had bigger problems than them. Okay, let's get moving towards the terminal that the heretics instructed. XXXXX. Hyas and his men continued moving until they were met by a large door. The two hunters began to charge up their cannons and take aim at the door when something caught their attention. Now there's no need to destroy this facility any more than it already has been. A voice said from behind them. Everyone quickly turned and took aim at the newcomer, only to see a floating metal ball with a purple eye. Wait, an oracle? Hyas asked before lowering his weapon, his men following suit. Oracle, that's a strange name, but I'm 0 to 101 Moonlight and I'm the monitor of installation PB. Light said as he hovered over towards Hyas. And why, might I ask, are you here? We are here to find something. Hyas said, and that would be, Light pushed. We are here to find either information on the Halos, or the creator. Hyas explained. The creator, why would you want to meet him? Light asked. So he does exist. Bress exclaimed. Of course, but you already knew that, didn't you? Light said with a slight chuckle. Where can we find him? Hyas asked. Oh, he's on the other side of that door there. Light said in a matter-of-fact tone. Wait, what? Hyas exclaimed as he turned towards the door. Hunters. The two hunters began to charge up their cannons when Light interrupted them again. Now I wouldn't do that if I were you. Light suggested. How else are we going to get through? Hyas asked. You could have just asked. Hyas sighed and ordered the hunters to stop charging up their cannons. May we enter? Of course not. Not without the creator's request you cannot. Light said. So ask him. Bress shouted in anger. No need to get so angry. Light responded in annoyance. XXXXX. Wait, this is. Naruto thought as he read the information on the screen in front of him. It seems that the heretics want to come in contact with you. Light transmitted as the screen went black in front of Naruto. Said Forerunner placed his hand onto the terminal and a blue stream began to flow from the terminal into the connector in the back of his head. No time. Activate the scuttle protocol. Evac all sentinels and equipment possible. Naruto said as, off to the side of the terminal, two metal beams floated up next to each other. An energy began to pool in between the poles before a small blue ball was formed at the center. A fixed teleporter. But what about you? Where are you going? Light asked out of concern. I'm following a lead that just came up. I'll contact you again when I've made it to my destination. Naruto replied. As you wish. Light replied. XXXXX. What was his answer? Hyas asked, becoming more and more impatient. Light perked up and looked around slightly before setting its gaze on the beings in front of it. The creator is very busy at the moment and has asked that you all leave immediately. Light said. Bress growled in anger at the answer. I see, hunters. Hyas ordered. Said hunters began to charge up their weapons and point them at the door once more, but suddenly the ground began to shake violently. What in the world was that? Bress shouted. This facility is currently undergoing protocol 4890. Light said. And what is that? Hyas asked. Another rumble shaking the ground beneath them. This place is currently being scuttled. Light said plainly. Hyas growled once more in anger before turning towards his hunters. Blow open that door. Hyas ordered. The hunters complied and fired their weapons into the door. The first pair of blasts dented the door inwards, but not opening it. Get those doors open. The hunters fired another volley of rounds into the door. Light, meanwhile, watched in curiosity as the heretics desperately tried to open the door until finally disappearing in a flash of yellow Fire another volley, Hyas shouted. Another volley smashed into the door, cracking it open slightly. Another volley smashed the door in slightly, but the door held firm. Hyas ordered his hunters to stop before he ran up to the door. Do you see anything? Bress asked as another rumble shook them about slightly. No. Nothing yet, Hyas said before something caught his eye. Wait, I see something. Sir, we are picking seismic activity around the Forerunner facility. You need to get out of there now. Yugana shouted over the mic. But Hyas wasn't listening as he stared through the crack in the door. Hyas could see the figure of something walking towards a portal. Wait, creator, Hyas shouted, trying to get its attention. The figure stopped and looked over towards the door. Hyas was about to say something, but was pulled to the side. Before Hyas could say anything, he saw the So Elite from earlier squeeze his body through the gap in the door. Hyas quickly ran up to the door and saw that the figure had walked through the portal and the So Elite was running towards the portal. Wait, what are you? But before Hyas could finish his sentence, the So Elite threw himself into the portal just as it closed. Hyas stared at the now dark room in complete shock. And just like that, the creator and one of his men disappeared. Their first chance, gone in the blink of an eye. Hyas crumpled to ground as he stared into the void where the creator once stood. Sir, Bress shouted as he ran over to Hyas. Bress grabbed his commander's shoulder and shook. Sir, we need to get moving. After another shake, Hyas quickly snapped out of it and stood up. You're right, let's get out of here. Yes, sir, everyone shouted before sprinting towards the way they came in. Another rumble, this one fiercer than the last, rocked the ground beneath them, knocking over one of the hunters. Hyas quickly stopped and put everything he had into pulling the downed hunter up. Bress and the other elite helped Hyas and the hunter was soon back on his feet. After a quick sprint to the entrance, Hyas noticed that there was no longer any raiders here, well, any raiders that were alive. The small team continued past the dead raiders and up the stairs. We are going to need a fast pickup, Hyas shouted over his mic. After a few moments of silence and static heard the pilot over the mic. Roger that, the pilot responded. Hyas and his men sprinted out of the facility just as another rumble shook the ground beneath them. The spirit transport ship hovered above, with a blue beam leading down to the ground. Hyas stopped next to the beam and turned around. One by one his men ran into the beam until he was the only one left. That's all of them, Hyas thought before looking around the swamp. The guns that once hovered above the water had disappeared. Save one. Hyas cursed himself and walked into the beam. After being sucked up into the ship, Hyas ordered his pilot to return to the cruiser. After a short flight back to the cruiser, Hyas hopped off the spirit and walked over to the large docking bay doors. Ordering the cruiser to head back to the fleet, Hyas looked down at the swamplands below and saw something incredible. Just as the docking bay doors began to close, due to exiting the atmosphere, a massive gray ship began to emerge from the water and speed past them. The doors closed and Hyas stared at the door in shock. Did you just see what I saw? Hyas turned and saw Bress, and everyone else in the docking bay, adoring the same expression as his. Hyas nodded in astonishment before rushing past them into the bridge of the cruiser. Yugana, are you seeing this? See what? I don't see any. What the hell is that? Yugana shouted in surprise. Speak to me, what's it doing? Hyas asked. It's leaving the area at a remarkable speed. How'd it leave the atmosphere that quickly? Yugana said in shock. It doesn't matter, can you chase it? Hyas asked as the cruiser he was on began to push into space. I don't think so. The Covenant are arriving in a few minutes and we need to get out of here. Yugana replied. Hyas growled and slammed his fist into the nearest wall. Fine, once we rendezvous, get us away from here. Hyas said. As you wish. Yugana replied before cutting the connection between them. After a few seconds of silence, a huge explosion could be heard behind them. The blast rocked the ship around a bit, but nothing damaged the ship. Hyas turned and saw Bress leaning against the door that exited the bridge. We'll get him next time. Bress said. Yeah, I just hope he's not an enemy, but a friend. Hyas said. Well, we won't know until we meet him. Hyas smiled and patted his friend on the shoulder as he walked by. You're damn right. Come on, let's go check on the men. XXXXX end. And please read. This one is important. Here's the chapter. I hope everyone is liking the story so far because I'm having a blast writing it. A little sooner than what you guys thought. Cheeky smiley face. But there are some things I need to bring up that everyone has to understand. When I first published this story 4 years ago, dear lord, it's been that long. There was little to no information on the Forerunners to work with. I was grasping at strings and had to create a lot of it due to the limited information that was at hand. I realize that now there is a game, Halo 4, which goes into detail about the Forerunner, CSs, that I've coined them, and a backstory that wasn't originally there. There is even a trilogy of books on the Forerunners now, something that was not available to me then. So I ask everyone this now, should I go back and change my story to be more updated to what the Forerunners are today? Or, should I keep writing the story as if I had the limited information I had before? I'll still throw some of the new things I've learned about the Forerunners into the story, but keep with the old setting. Please let me know as I'm at a complete loss of what to do. I'm willing to go both ways, but I'd prefer to stick with the story I have going now. I like where it's going and I think most of you guys do too. As always everyone, thanks for reading my story, laughing face. The cold bite of the high mountains clawed at Naruto's suit as said Forerunner glanced down the icy halls of the once great, but hidden, Forerunner facility. Snow covered the corners of the halls while ice and rock molded with the walls of the hallway. Light entered through either the windows to the vast mountain range outside, or small holes in the roof. Snow fell from said holes as a blizzard raged outside, making a rather loud noise. Naruto could tell that it was the afternoon on this part of the planet and that he was counting down the seconds that passed by ever since he departed the last facility. The facility he was in now, known as Dark Soar, holds vital information that would soon be deleted if Naruto doesn't reach the terminal in time. The countdown started when the last terminals, in the swamplands of the last planet, information was accessed, which meant that the young Forerunner had to make it to the second terminal before the vital information was deleted. But Naruto had a problem that he was not anticipating being thrust onto him. Naruto was currently sitting against one of the walls of the many rooms inside Dark Soar with a passed-out Sangheili laying on the ground. His black armor and helmet signified him as a special operations elite, but the elite was smaller than most. Shorter, more nimble, but there was something else about the elite that seemed off. Naruto shrugged it off and sighed deeply at his current predicament. He could just leave the elite here, but they were extremely far from any covenant, or heretic, outposts of the elites. Chances of survival are slim, if not non-existent. Naruto cursed himself for being so soft towards others and swiftly stood from his seated position. If the elite was going to survive, then he need to come with him, but Naruto was being timed, and every second he waited for the elite to stir from his slumber, it taxed his chances for retrieving the information from that terminal. After moving from his seated position to the elite side, Naruto kneeled down and pressed a button on the side of the elite's helmet. The helmet made a soft noise before it loosened from around the elite's head. The small Sangheili stirred slightly at Naruto movement near his head, but remained asleep while the young Forerunner gently removed the elite's helmet. Naruto raised a brow at what he saw underneath the helmet because, while there was no law against it, it was seen as abnormal or taboo at best. The Sangheili was not a he, but a she. The young Forerunner rubbed the back of his head in confusion before placing the helmet he was holding onto the ground next to the female Sangheili. After a few more seconds of processing what he should do, the Sangheili groaned and began to move around. She was obviously sore from either fighting her way to get to the portal, or passing through the portal itself. It did feel weird, and if you are neither used to it, or prepared, then it can pressure your body immensely. Naruto continued to look over her equipment before finally finding the human equivalent to a dog tag. Ra, Manticrea, Naruto said to himself before moving away from Ra and towards the door. Where am I? The elite asked to no one in particular. She moved her hands up to eyes and rubbed them, but stopped after a moment of doing this. My helmet. Where's my helmet? She seemed so panicked by the concept of losing her helmet, but Naruto understood why. Female soldiers are few and far between, and normally seen as taboo in Sangheili culture. Females are generally supposed to stay home and defend the homestead while the males served in the military. While female Sangheili joining the military is rare at best, how a female managed to join the special operations branch eluded Naruto. Ra finally saw her helmet sitting next to her and picked it up quickly, as if it was the only keeping her alive. Naruto shook his head and pressed a button on the console next to the door. The door beeped twice before swiftly opening to the hallway outside. The noise from the door alerted her to Naruto's presence, and she reacted accordingly. Moving like a seasoned warrior, and as nimble as a ninja, she turned and reached for her energy sword. But when Ra placed her hand on her leg, where her energy sword was supposed to be, she realized it was not there. But the glare she was giving Naruto remained in place, meaning she either knew who he was and didn't like him, or didn't know and thought Naruto was an enemy. Are you the creator? Ra asked with slight hint of anger and annoyance in her voice. Naruto tilted his head slightly and nodded. It became clear to Naruto that she was not a fan of him. Her glare intensified after she received her response, but Ra remained standing in a battle stance in case Naruto tried anything. You're a fake, aren't you? It was more of a statement than a question. Would you believe me if I told you I wasn't? Ra gritted her teeth together in obvious annoyance at Naruto's answer. No, I wouldn't. A silence fell over the two forces. Ra continued to take periodic glances around the room, probably to search for one of her missing weapons. Naruto had, right when Ra fell from the portal, took her weapons and placed them outside the door. Just in case his pursuer had any wrong intentions. So what will you do? Naruto asked, his helmet masking his face from Ra. What do you mean? Naruto thought it was rather obvious what her current position was. You are currently on an unknown planet far from Covenant-controlled space with no way of getting home. Naruto explained before turning and walking out the door. Ra's eyes followed his every move, but there was no ill intent coming from the way he walked. Meaning, Naruto went on to say, you're my only way back. Ra finished with forced contempt. She didn't trust the young creature, but he was holding all the cards. Something that didn't sit well with Ra. Yes, so what will you do now? Naruto asked once again from the hallway. Ra looked down at the ground for a moment, weighing her options. If you wish to follow me, then you may. I will not stop you. Ra looked up to see Naruto beginning to walk away from her. Or you can stay here and die in this facility. Alone. Those are your choices and you are free to choose. And then he was gone. Ra let out a breath of air that she didn't realize she was holding. What was she to do now? Follow this fake around until he allows her to go home or meet back up with the Burning Legion? What about her original mission to get highest to meet this creature? The portal had disappeared, and the last facility had been destroyed. Meaning there was no getting back and no being followed. No matter how much she hated it, the fake was right. Ra had no other way of getting home and this creature knew it. Wait, Ra ran out the door, after picking up her helmet, and looked down both ways. He was nowhere in sight, but there was only one way he could have gone. One way led to a dead end with an ice-covered door, so that means, given that he can't walk through walls, he went the opposite way. He better not have left me. After saying that, Ra began to run but kicked something as she began to make her way down the frozen hallway. The young Sangheili glanced down and saw her weapons, a carbine with an ammo belt and an energy sword, lying near the door. Did he? It didn't matter what the fake was doing or thinking, she needed him to get back home and Ra was going to use him for as long as possible. XXXXX. Look, Commander, I know you want to find the creator and your lost soldier, but if you begin this search with no lead, then it will only strain your supplies and frustrate your troops. A voice said from over a screen on the main bridge of Hyas's flagship. On the screen stood a heretic commander with red armor. Hyas, Bress, Polaris, and Ugana stood in front of the screen, but the commander of the ship was extremely frustrated. Listen, Voro, I saw the creator and he went through a portal along with one of my men. I don't care how long it will take. I will find this creature and he will answer our questions about the prophecy. Hyas boomed in anger. The room went quiet at the pure force of Hyas's voice. On one hand, you must give Hyas credit for his determination in finding the creator, but Voro brought up a very valid point. If you so wish it, then you can continue your search. I'm not the commander of your troops, but I am an ally. And, as such, I will advise you to not search for the creator until we have a way to communicate with your soldier that managed to follow him through the portal or find him through our research. Voro explained. Hyas was grinding his teeth in anger at the thought of stopping the search before it even began. And how long will this research take? Hyas asked. Like anything that deals with the Forerunners, we don't know. Ever since the creator came into the picture, it has become extremely hard to get a hold of anything. That's not good enough. My man could be long since dead by the time your research is completed. Get used to it, Hyas. Voro said in an unusual angry tone. Voro was known for being calm and collected under any circumstance, but it seemed that Hyas was straining his patience. You are a commander and sometimes you lose men. I thought by now you would be used to a few men being killed under your command, but I suppose I was wrong. Hyas growled in frustration at the tone Voro responded. It's not my man I'm so angry about. Hyas exclaimed as he slammed his fists into the table. Voro sighed deeply at Hyas's predicament. Hyas had seen the creator in the flesh, and not being to end their search before it even began was a blow to the heretics and his pride. Look, we don't know where they went or how far they traveled. If you search for them now, then nothing good will come of it. After a moment of silence and deep thinking, I know, but I was so close to meeting it and finally getting the information we need to break the hold of the prophets. We all wish for the prophets' lies to be brought to an end, but we must be patient. If we expend all our energy and resources now, then we will only break ourselves. Voro said reassuringly. The leader of the Burning Legion sighed deeply and nodded. Agreed. What do you suggest we do? Hyas asked. Bress grumbled under his breath at that last question. He didn't really like Hyas taking orders from others that were of equal rank. There's a planet named Doliris where we have an outpost set up. You can rest and resupply there for the time being until we find anything. Here's the coordinates. We've received the coordinates, sir. A soldier said. Sounds like a plan. Anything else? Hyas asked. Just remember this, Commander, Voro said as Hyas went to turn off the screen. I'm not your commander. You can do anything that you feel is right. Just try and consult me before you go and do something precarious. Hyas chuckled at his use of words and nodded. You better do the same. We're in this together. Indeed we are. Good luck, Commander, and have a good rest. Voro said before cutting the link between the two ships. We aren't seriously going to end the search, are we? Polaris asked. What choice do we have? We have no clue where they went. They could be anywhere in the universe. Besides, we need to restock our inventory of food and water. Hyas said as he began to walk around the table towards his chair. Polaris followed him before standing in front of him. What now? What about the soldier that chased the creator through the portal? What will happen to him? Polaris asked. Like Voro said, we've all lost men before. This situation is no different. Bress said from the other side of the table. While I wish we could have stopped him from jumping into the portal. So we are just going to leave him? Polaris exclaimed. Hyas tilted his head to the side as he studied his special operations commander. Why are you so vocal about losing him? Was he your friend? Hyas asked. Yeah, Polaris replied with withheld emotion. You could say that. Hyas sighed deeply at his friend's position. He placed a hand on Polaris's shoulder before speaking. What's his name? Ra. Polaris responded. Ra. Huh. Well, we can only hope that the creator has enough hospitality for our friend. Hyas said before removing his hand. But what if he's a fake? What if we find him and he's not an actual Forerunner? Polaris asked. Many of the other crew members were now looking at them as they talked. Hyas noticed this and realized that not everyone on his ship believed that the creator was an actual Forerunner. While, personally, Hyas truly believes that the creator was a Forerunner, he couldn't blame the portion of his men that believes he's a fake. Even so, he can access the archives of the Sentinels, and if he truly is a fake like some of you believe, then at the very least he will be able to find out if these halos truly are what the prophets say they are. Hyas said. Polaris nodded, accepting the answer Hyas has given. The other crew members on the bridge also seemed to accept his answer and return to work. But what about Ra? Polaris asked, still fretting over the soldier that he lost. Like I said before, let's just hope that the creator's hospitality is on the same level as a covenant priest. XXXXX. And here I thought you were going to stay behind. Naruto said when Ra appeared around the corner of the hallway. It's not like I've got a choice. Ra spat. At least you're not pointing your weapon at me. That's a start, Naruto said before pressing a button on the door. The red light changed from red to green and slid open. We can only get those doors open by smashing them open or hacking them. This creator must be an extremely prevalent hacker, Ra thought as she followed the young Forerunner through the door and into yet another hallway. Like the one before, the door at the other end was frozen closed by a large block of ice, but the door was open underneath it. Naruto mumbled as he approached the built-in glacier. Ra watched closely as the fake began to inspect the massive wall of ice before stopping and taking a step back. What's he? Naruto gingerly lifted his arm and pointed it at the ice. After a moment of silence, to Ra's annoyance, Naruto's hand began to glow a bright red that resembled the sun. It only took a couple more seconds before a massive red beam exploded out from Naruto's hand, melting the ice. Leaving a tunnel melted through the center of the ice. Wow, Ra stared at Naruto and the melted ice in amazement, but quickly masked her surprise with a frown. If this fake has managed to steal this much technology and gain control of some of the sentinels then. Naruto was looking at Ra, confusion masked behind his helmet, as she stared at the young forerunner. This snapped Ra out of her daze when she realized Naruto was looking at her. Shut it, fake. I don't know how you've gained control of so much of the forerunner's technology, but you better be prepared to answer some questions. Ra said prematurely as Naruto crawled into the hole. The hole was small and the walls were warm, even though they were clearly made of ice. A red hue resonated from parts of the wall, and burned when touched. Naruto crawled out of the hole and into the icy conditions outside. Visibility was low and the ground had been iced over, making it hard to walk. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, due to the blizzard, but a narrow bridge ran out from the mountain spire to another, much taller, mountain spire at the other end of the bridge. All around them the blizzard cloaked the beautiful mountains that stretched as far as the eye could see. The harsh winds pushed against him and made his cloak flap in the wind. Could have made the hole a little bigger. Ra had just removed herself from the tunnel of ice and was trying her best to get a foothold on the icy surface. The young forerunner truly hoped that Ra was not going to be like this entire time. Maybe he should have just left her on the ground if this was the way she was going to act around him. Not that Naruto wasn't used to this sort of treatment. He got his share bad treatment when he was kid growing up. Naruto decided it best to simply not respond and walk out into the blizzard. Even if she hated him, Ra still needed Naruto for the time being. I wonder why I'm even caring about this Sanghaili. It's not like I have a commitment to help her get home. Naruto thought as he approached the bridge. The narrow bridge was simple and small, when compared to the architectural feats of other bridges the forerunners had built. A small railing, not enough to stop anyone or anything from falling, lined both sides of the bridge. The bridge was wide enough for 2 lanes of walking traffic, meaning that this facility was small and lightly manned by Naruto's ancestors. Follow, Naruto ordered with a harsh tone. Ra's eyes narrowed before she placed her helmet upon her head. Where did the harsh tone come from? The two walked onto the bridge slowly to avoid slipping, but Naruto could tell that Ra was having a difficult time trying to stay upright. Over the next few minutes, however, their pace resembled that of an infant's crawl. Ra slipped once again. This must have been the 4th time Ra had slipped, and fell to the ground. Damn ice. This is all your fault, you dirty fake. Ra exclaimed in frustration. Naruto stopped and looked over his shoulder at the disgruntled Sanghaili. If you would have just stayed and answered Hyas's questions, then I wouldn't be trapped on an unknown planet with a greedy fake such as yourself. Ra shouted as she fumbled about trying to stand. The fake decided it best to stay silent at Ra's demeaning words. The word fake seems to be her favorite insult at the moment, but the more Ra talked, the more Naruto was inclined to just leave her in the frozen facility to die. Why are you in such a rush anyway? Why couldn't you have? Ra said before finally standing up. Because I have other, more important, business to take care of that doesn't involve answering your petty questions. Naruto replied coldly. Petty? What Commander Hyas was going to ask you was not petty. Ra shouted. I don't have time for this. The young forerunner shook his head and began to again walk across the bridge. By the time Ra got her footing straight, Naruto had disappeared into the harsh blizzard. Don't you dare leave, Ra shouted, but a loud shriek interrupted Ra's complaint. The female Sanghaili froze in her place and began to look around her. The wall of white snow and harsh winds that blew against her armor camouflaged the creature that made the loud noise. Ra didn't move for a moment, as if trying to convince herself that what she heard was real and not just a figment of her imagination. After waiting for a couple more seconds, Ra took a step towards where Naruto disappeared, but stopped when the bridge shook violently. Silence followed as Ra readied her carbine and pointed it in the direction where they had come from. The bridge shook once again, closer this time. Ra slowly began to back away from the trembles, but as she did, the violent shakes started to become more and more frequent. The carbine in Ra's hands began to shake from, not just the cold, but fear. Ra has been to various planets before that had violent indigenous wildlife, but nothing as big as what she was feeling now. When the shaking finally stopped, there was a feeling of something extremely close staring at her from beyond the wall of blinding snow. A feeling of dread crawled up spine as her breathing became more rapid, as if her body was preparing her for something. Out of the blizzard's haze came a large bird's head with black feathers and beak, just inches away from Ra's face. The beak was at least the size of a Wraith Covenant mobile artillery tank, and its head scaled to size. The giant bird had 6 dark red eyes that stared at Ra intensely. The barrel of her carbine was almost touching the bird's giant beak, but the female Sanghaili was frozen in place. Fear gripped onto Ra's muscles and refused to loosen its deadly grasp. Ra was shaken from her paralysis when the giant bird screeched into Ra's face, creating a massive gust of wind that forced Ra to slide backwards. The young Sanghaili stopped sliding and pointed her carbine at the bird before firing off a few rounds. This only seemed to make the massive feather monster even angrier as said monster flapped its massive wings, sending out another gust of wind and snow. Seeing the potential of possibility falling off the side of the bridge, Ra quickly pulled out her sword and slammed it into the ice-covered bridge beneath her. The wind smashed into her body, but she held firm while firing as many rounds into the giant beast as possible with her other available hand. When the bird finished flapping its wings, and saw Ra still holding firm to the ground, the beast summoned another screech from its beak. Using its massive wings to propel itself forward, the bird shot towards Ra at an almost blinding speed. Caught off guard, Ra took a hit to her shoulder from the talons of the bird as she rolled to the side. Her body slamming into the railing of the bridge, purple blood streaking across the ground from where she once stood. Slowly standing, Ra grasped her shoulder while looking around. The massive black bird was nowhere in sight. Blood continued to gently flow from her wound as she walked over to her sword and removed it from the ground. Then, something moved out of the corner of her eye, and when she turned, a massive beak smashed into the chest plate of her armor. Ra flew backwards, sliding across the ice-covered bridge as she's done before. A bright blue light emitted from the snowy haze, but Ra had little time to think of what the light was as she barreled backwards. Ra bounced over the railing and tried to grab onto the ledge. The ice that coated the bridge made this impossible, but the female Sanghali's survival instinct kicked in. Ra quickly pulled out her energy sword and smashed it into the side of the bridge. The sword sunk into the ice and metal below and halted her fall. With a deep sigh, Ra looked below her to see how far the drop was, but found only the pure white of the blizzard staring back. The harsh winds of the high mountains pushed the dangling Sanghali to and fro. Ra gritted her teeth as the feeling in her fingers began to leave her. Using all the strength she could muster, Ra pulled herself up, but when she placed her other hand on the railing she couldn't grip the icy ledge. Her hand slipped and she fell back down, but when she fell the sword sliced further down the side of the bridge. Damn it, at this rate, Ra thought. Her fingers holding onto the sword were completely numb and the cold was now eating its way into her suit. I suppose I deserve this for being so reckless. Following that thing through the portal, listening to my father's crazy idea, going along with it. I should have just listened to mother and stayed at home like all other female Sanghali. Ra's fingers began to slip from the sword as these thoughts passed through her mind. Thoughts of home, family, and friends began to fill her mind. I hope he doesn't blame himself for this. Then her hand slipped from the sword and she felt herself begin to fall. XXXXX. What is the meaning of this meeting? We were getting close to capturing the third-tailed beast. An image of Didera shouted in frustration at being diverted from his original task. Goo, why do I even come to these things? Kisame mumbled to himself. From what I can gather it's because of the Nine-Tails situation. Sasori said. Nine-Tails situation? What situation? Didera asked as he looked over at Itachi and Kisame, who remained silent. I've been keeping this information silent until now, but I feel that it needs to be brought forth to everyone. Pain said to the group of S-class missing ninja. What information was so important that it needed to be withheld from us? Hidan asked. Over the last 2 years we have been hunting the Jinchuriki and so far we have managed to capture the 2, 5, and 6-tailed beasts, but something has come up involving the 9-tailed beast that has thrown a wrench into our plans. Pain explained. You didn't screw anything up, did you, Kisame? Didera asked with a smug expression on his face. Shut your mouth, you clay-eating. Kisame began to retort. Calm yourselves. This predicament was out of our hands. Pain said. What is this predicament? Kakuzu asked with a hint of annoyance at Didera's antics. 2 years ago the 9-tailed Jinchuriki disappeared. Pain stated. The room remained silent at the prospect. You mean? Sasori started. Not even Zetsu could find him. Pain finished. The room went silent as everyone thought what the meaning of this new change of events. That is interesting, Kakuzu said, breaking the ice that befell the dangerous group of criminals. What will we do then? If Zetsu can't find it, Hidan began, but trailed off near the end. But it seems we've had a stroke of luck. Pain explained. Oh, and what is this, stroke of luck? Kakuzu asked, sarcasm laced in his voice. Before I move on, does everyone know of the Kalodic incident? Pain asked. Who doesn't? It's been the talk of almost every village. Didera said. How the beautiful coastal city of the Southern Ocean was simply wiped out in an instant by a mysterious cloaked figure. What does that have to do with the 9 tails? Hidan pressed. It seems that the destruction of Kalodic was its doing. Pain replied. Why would the 9 tails attack his own nation's town? Sasori voiced more to himself than the others. We don't know, but Zetsu managed to see what destroyed the city. While he only saw a glimpse, it seems he used a powerful jutsu that destroyed the city in the blink of an eye. Pain explained. Must have been a powerful jutsu to be able to destroy an entire city. Kisame voiced. So what you're trying to say is the 9 tails has gone rouge. Didera stated. The 9 tails going rouge doesn't concern us. What does matter is that he has reappeared and can be captured. Sasori stated. That is true, but we have learned we cannot rely on Zetsu to track him down. Pain said. So, from this day forth, Kakuzu and Hidan will join Itachi and Kisame in the search for the 9 tails. As you wish, Kakuzu replied. As for everyone else, continue with your missions as instructed. Pain ordered before disappearing from his position on his finger. Everyone else disappeared soon afterwards, leaving only the statue and its cold lair to itself. XXXXX. Got you. A voice rang out as Ra felt someone grab onto her forearm. The female Sanghali looked up and saw the fake grabbing onto her arm. What are you? Ra began to say before Naruto began pulling her up over the railing and onto the bridge. Ra fell onto the bridge, breathing heavily, and grasping onto her bleeding shoulder. The female Sanghali looked up at Naruto and noticed he was simply looking down at her, but since she couldn't see underneath Naruto's helmet, Ra saw this as a marker of impatience or annoyance. What really Naruto felt was a mixture of pity and concern. Where's the giant creature? Ra asked while trying to stand. Naruto pointed behind her and as she turned she saw red blood slowing freezing against the ice. Finally Ra recognized the giant bird that had attacked her, but with one thing missing. Its head had disappeared from its neck. I thought you were in a rush. Ra asked. I am, was Naruto's simple reply before he reached down to help the female Sanghali stand, but was rejected. I can take care of myself. Ra replied with spite. I know you can. Naruto calmly replied before helping Ra stand. Said Elite sighed before letting Naruto lift her up and sling her arm over his shoulder. She is a stubborn one. A subtle sigh left Naruto's mouth as he began to support the young Sanghali across the bridge. Ra's height was close to Naruto's, except she was a little taller than him. Over the course of the next 10 minutes Ra would occasionally slip, only to be picked up by Naruto. How is he not slipping on this ice? Is it because of something in his suit? The two finally made it to the other side of the bridge and Naruto opened the door. After moving inside, Naruto began to see the frost that had built up on Ra's suit and the shiver that ran through her body. The blood had stopped running down her shoulder and there was a giant dent in her armor. Naruto turned to the young one and lifted his hand. What are you doing? Ra asked as Naruto's hand began to glow red. Ra slowly began to back away from Naruto until finally hitting the wall behind her. Naruto walked up to Ra and placed his hand on her armor. She then felt warmth enter her body and her armor begin to heat up. The built-up ice and frost that latched onto her armor began to melt away as feeling began to return to Ra's outer appendages. A sigh of relief escaped Ra's mouth. Naruto knew that Ra appreciated being rescued, but also knew that changing her vision of him being fake would take time. In the end, though, Naruto didn't really care what Ra thought of him. Once they were off this planet he would drop her off at the nearest Sangheli colony and be on his way. After a couple more seconds, Naruto placed his hand on Ra's wound and a dark blue light began to emit from his hand. The pain in her shoulder began to fade away over the course of a couple seconds. This may not heal the wound, but it should decrease the pain for now. Naruto stood and looked down at the now sitting Sangheli. You can stay here if you'd like, but I need to. Keep moving. I know, Ra said before standing up. Naruto nodded and began to walk down the hallway, Ra following behind him. Yeah, he saved her, Ra will admit that, but that doesn't mean he isn't a fake. There is simply no possible way that a Forerunner has lived this entire time. Especially just one. How could a single Forerunner live for so long without reproducing? Unless they live for a very long time, which seemed extremely unlikely given the circumstances. A short time passed with them walking down various hallways and rooms in silence. The facility looked like every other Forerunner facility that she's been in when she was in the Covenant. It seems like every time they'd find a Forerunner facility it would have little to no useful objects or information on the surface. To find the meat and bones of what the facility had to offer you'd have to dig or hack your way into their systems, but even that didn't work half of the time. Ra looked at the back of the cloaked creature in front of her. She's never seen a creature like this one before, but he knew their language and dialect. How they moved and what they revered most. Ra began to wonder how this creature, whose intelligence was so high, grew up. I wonder if it has a name. If want to say something then say it. Naruto said without turning. Ra jumped slightly at the sudden break in silence. It's nothing, Ra stated. She wasn't very convincing when she said this, but she guessed her helmet did a pretty good job of masking her voice since he didn't push the matter. Another silence settled between the two before Naruto stopped in front of a door. The door was just like any other that lined the hallway, but it had a keypad on the wall next to it. The young Forerunner typed in a few characters into the keypad and the red light at the center of the door turned green. After turning green, the door beeped softly before sliding open. Naruto walked into the room and noticed the massive terminal on the opposite side of the wall. Its screen had a timer that continued to count down. 3 minutes, Ra asked herself, trying to figure out what the purpose of the timer was. The timer stopped when the fake placed a hand on the terminal's keyboard. The terminal quickly unlocked itself after recognizing the owner of the hand. Authorization accepted, the terminal said in a language that Ra could not understand. Words and characters appeared on the screen that the young Sangheli didn't understand either. You understand that? Ra asked as Naruto began to shift through the information in the terminal, looking for something very specific. I do, Naruto replied. How? Ra questioned further. If I told you then you wouldn't believe me. It was true. If Naruto said that it was because he was a Forerunner then Ra would simply blow it off as another lie, but then how did he take care of that giant bird that nearly killed her? It had to have been the suit that this creature stole from the Ancient Ones. Ra remained silent as she watched Naruto rapidly move through the information that only he could understand. Why did you come back? Naruto stopped typing on the keyboard. I mean, I'm just another Sangheli to you. That much is true. Ra was just another Sangheli that didn't mean much to him. If he would have simply let her die on that bridge then nothing would have changed and he would have moved on like nothing ever happened. And to me you're a fake that has been taking advantage of what the Ancient Ones left behind. To be perfectly honest, Naruto had no idea why he went back to save Ra. This young Sangheli was a mystery factor that could possibly hurt or help Naruto. Said Forerunner never liked the prospect of walking into the unknown, but it seems that as of late that's all he's been facing. Still, the thought of letting something or someone die just because he couldn't be bothered struck a chord with Naruto. Life back on his home planet was so much more simple. Naruto sighed heavily before returning to his research. That question needed to be shuffled to the back of his mind for now because there was more important things to take care of. Ra waited for a response, but nothing came from the quiet creature in front of her. This would have annoyed her, but she was too tired to follow up on her question. The medical treatment that Naruto had applied to her shoulder was fading and all she wanted to do was sleep. It only took a few more seconds of watching the cloaked creature type away at the terminal before her eyes began to droop. Ra's muscles slowly betrayed her as she pressed her back against the wall on the far side of the room. Ra knew that, if she fell asleep, that she would be vulnerable, but with her mind fading away, the only thing she hoped for is. The sound of something sliding against the wall made itself known to Naruto as said Forerunner turned to see Ra sitting against the wall with her head drooped down to her chest. Naruto smiled at the sleeping form of Ra. He was glad to see her get some rest after everything that has happened today. Must have been hard to chase after someone that may be hostile for the sake of her comrades. Naruto thought as another thought came to his mind. I wonder if her comrades ever knew of her gender. Naruto shrugged off the thought and continued to navigate through the terminal in front of him. He needed to find out what his predecessor found on the grave mind. If what Naruto found on the last terminal was any indication, then the last hero of the heavens may have stumbled onto something that could possibly take care of the grave mind for good. XXXXX end. Sorry for the long wait, but school has been handing me a new one as of late and I've barely had any time to write, let alone think. I want to see where this chapter goes and where it's heading in the future. Please, before anyone says, you just added Ra into the story for some love interest blah blah blah. No, Ra has a very important part in the plot and if I said any more then I would simply ruin it. So, enjoy the ride. I think it will only get better from here. As for what I'm going to do with the new information that has come out in recent years. It seems most people want me to incorporate the new technology into the story as it progresses. Possibly through Discovery or Naruto's own inventions, the decision on how this new information will be added into the story will be made as we progress. Now I know that this decision will not please everyone and I can only do so much for the people that are on either extremes, rewriting it with the new information or completely leaving out all the new information, but I feel like this is the direction that I wanted to take the story as well. And I'm glad to see the majority of my readers agree with me. As always everyone, thanks for reading my story, laughing face. Naruto breathed in the thin air of the high mountains before slowly breathing said air out of his lungs and into a light fog. Naruto's breath quickly disappeared into the soft breeze that was brushing the snow from the balcony and off into the endless mountain tops. A soft gray layer of clouds hung over the sky, which lightly sprinkled small white flakes of snow onto anything that was beneath its icy grip. Dark Soar, while considered one facility, was built into two separate mountains with an interlocking bridge being the only means of transportation between them. When Naruto's ancestors first came to this planet, they immediately located the largest mountain and began construction within the frozen rock. After years of slow expansion, the ancient forerunners found that there was not enough space and expanded into a sister mountain that sat nearby. The primary facility had 12 floors and the second had 4, with the bridge connecting to the 6th and 4th floor, respectively. The young forerunner lifted his head up and looked into the darkened sky with a feeling of anxiety and dread. He knew that the grave mind was out there, building up its strength slowly before finding the perfect time to strike. Snow lightly landed onto Naruto's exposed face, his helmet being held in his right hand loosely. It has been 12 hours since he first began his research on the terminal, and his new companion was still out cold. A small smile graced Naruto's features as he remembered Ra's sleeping face as the tough Sangheili slept her worries away. But now what should he do with Ra? That certainly was the question that continued to cross Naruto's mind as he sighed deeply and leaned his body against the icy railing of the balcony. Ra had a mission, and that was to bring him to meet her commander so that he could answer some questions. The young forerunner shook his head in annoyance. To be truthful, Naruto didn't much care about the Covenant, or what they worshipped. Naruto had other objectives that remained much more important than some Covenant civil war that could potentially spawn from the information he gave to Ra and her band of heretics. Or, at very least, an even larger expansion of the one that is going on now. Another deep sigh slowly came from the young forerunner before he turned to see a white sentinel with red stripes running up some of its metal appendages. Its normal red eye was replaced by a bright green eye, which slowly blinked once Naruto had turned his body to face it. I see, is she doing better? Naruto asked out loud. Another moment of silence washed over the two as the green light on the sentinel slowly blinked. Good, let's go see how our guest is holding up. The white sentinel began to hover down, and then back up, before turning and leaving through the open door in which it originally came. Naruto looked down at his helmet and stared into the empty compartment where his head normally was. His helmet had become something of a comfort to have on. While it provided him with various enhancements, it has proven to be a shield against the world that either hated him or wished him harm. After shaking his head of such thoughts, Naruto placed the helmet onto his head and took one last look out over the beautiful mountain tops. I've never really liked the mountains. And then exited the balcony. XXXXX. A pain rocketed through her back as Ra slowly opened her eyes to the cold room that surrounded her. It was a different room than the one she originally fell asleep in. This room was larger than the vacant terminal room. Complete with a one-person cot that was built into the wall, a small desk with a chair sitting in front of it, and a tiny closet. Everything was the standard gray that normally associated itself with being inside a Forerunner facility. Light blue lights inside the semi-clear ceiling and floor illuminated the windowless room. Ra began to lift herself from the bed when a heavy gray blanket fell to the dust-covered floor. It's transparently clear that nobody has stayed in this room for an extremely long time as dust particles could be seen flying into the air after the blanket had landed. The pain in her shoulder had, for the most part, subsided. Only small tingle where the deepest part of her wound remained, making Ra rub said injury with an awkward grimace. How did her wound heal so fast? How long has she been asleep? Where was the fake? As these thoughts ran through her mind, Ra began to pat her body up and down for her equipment, as she had become accustomed to doing while in the military. Panic began to sink in as she quickly realized that her armor, and equipment, was missing. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to find any sign of her protective armor, but there was nothing else inside the room except Ra and the dust that lingered in the air. A light beeping noise emitted from the door and the once red light turned green before blinking twice. The door slid open to reveal a white sentinel with a green eye. Ra quickly jumped backwards and got down low to the ground in a defensive stance. Even without her equipment, Ra still knew hand-to-hand combat. But the sentinel simply stared at her in what Ra could only make out to be relative confusion. Is it one of the fakes? Ra thought as she began to ease out of her defensive stance. The white sentinel, after detecting that the female Sangheili was becoming less aggressive, slowly began to float towards her. Ra's body began to tense when the sentinel came within a couple feet of her shoulder. A green light, with smaller, much brighter, specks of light, began to shine over where Ra's wound once was. What are you? A warmth began to spread out underneath her skin from where the green light was making contact. A deep sigh came from Ra's mouth. The sentinel stopped its glowing light and then moved to her chest. Again, a green light shone itself onto Ra's chest. The only thing that she was wearing was her tattered under armor, which every Sangheili soldier wore. A tear in her clothing ran across her left shoulder from where the massive black bird dug a talon into her shoulder. Have a nice sleep, a voice said from the doorway. Ra jumped from her half-dazed state after hearing the masked voice of what she could only presume was the fake. The female Sangheili looked towards the door to see said fake leaning against the door with his arms crossed. He was wearing his helmet and the hood that hung behind his cloak lightly swayed from the cold breeze that swept into the room from the hallway. Quickly regaining her composure, Ra quickly replied, "How long have I been out?" Her tone was cold, making Naruto shake his head with a frown. 12 hours. Ra nodded and looked down as the white sentinel cut the green connection between them before floating up to eye level. Its eye blinked a few times before turning and leaving the room. It seems your chest and arm are doing better, Naruto stated as Ra kneeled down and picked up the blanket from the ground. She threw it over herself and narrowed her eyes at the young forerunner. What was it doing? And where's my weapons and armor? Ra demanded. She hated feeling defenseless, especially around someone, or something, she didn't know. It was doing a final diagnostic on your shoulder and chest. You should be a little more appreciative towards the sentinel that healed you, Naruto said before pushing his body off the door frame. And my equipment? Ra asked as she followed Naruto out into the hallway. The hallways mirrored the setting of her room. Windowless with the only light coming from the ceiling and floor, albeit a lot brighter than the room she had slept in, allowing her to see the surroundings with much more ease than before. Naruto didn't respond and simply decided to feign ignorance. Ra grit her teeth together in irritation when no response came. Are you going to answer me? Ra asked with increased frustration evident in her tone of voice. Still, no answer came from the slightly smaller creature. Ra finally lost her patience and placed her hand onto the fake's shoulder, effectively stopping him. Can you even hear me underneath that bucket? Ra shouted more than asked. Naruto sighed deeply before looking at the hand that was now placed on his shoulder. Did you always talk this much when you were with your Burning Legion? Naruto asked bluntly. Ra's eyes widened somewhat, giving all the information that Naruto needed to deduct from his question. He read all of Ra's facial expressions. The increase of breath, widening of her eyes, the way she averted her gaze to the side. Even if all of these characteristics appeared for a split second, Naruto picked up on them instantly. What do you mean? Of course I talk to my comrades. Ra shouted in anger, but her tone seems to have an anxious edge to it. Naruto watched calmly as she tried to defend herself. It was easily transparent to see that she was lying through her teeth, but Naruto let it drop and tried to continue walking. This action failed as the hand that was on his shoulder held firm. You didn't answer my initial question, Ra stated with anger still in her voice. Be patient, and your answer will be revealed to you in time, Naruto said before removing Ra's hand from his shoulder. The young forerunner began walking down the hallway with a fuming Sangheili watching his back, as if trying to burn a hole into the back of his head with her intense glare. After a couple minutes of silent walking, and an elevator ride later, the pair entered a large room with several round tables scattered about. These tables were connected to the ground, along with the benches that surrounded them, but when Ra glanced around the room she noticed the white sentinel from earlier hovering over an object that was covered by a black cloth on one of the tables. It's you, Ra said before running over to the table that the sentinel was hovering over. Naruto silently chuckled as the female Sangheili approached the medical sentinel with a bright expression on her face. I wanted to thank you for healing me, Ra said while bowing slightly. The sentinel looked at Ra before over to the other occupant in the room. Naruto shrugged and walked up to the table. It says it was just doing its job, Naruto explained. In truth, sentinels couldn't feel, or have any free form of thought. The sentinels only work and do their appointed duties. The only beings with any form of free thought, at least from what Naruto could deduce from the downloader, are the AI-infused monitors. Naruto was simply putting words into the sentinel's mouth so that Ra would feel a little better. Ra grinned slightly, and looked down to the bundle that was being covered by the black sheet in confusion. What's this? Her answer came when the young forerunner took the sheet off the bundle to reveal her armor in all its glory. It looked the same, except it had been polished and repaired to near mint condition. Her carbine and sword sat next to the armor. My armor, Ra exclaimed as she quickly picked up her chest piece and examined it. She wasn't quite sure what she was expecting, but it looked perfect. She quickly looked over her shoulder to see that the fake was watching her with that faceless expression. It was hard for Ra to gauge what the fake was feeling due to the helmet that masked his face from view. Maybe that was why she was getting so upset so quickly. Never before had she become so angry that quickly, but not being able to so see his face and see what he was possibly thinking, or feeling, got to her for some reason. I suppose I should thank you, Ra said. It was clear that she was forcing herself to speak those words. Naruto frowned deeply as he watched Ra think of the correct words to say. Don't, Naruto replied. Ra looked at him with a confused expression. It's clear that you don't want to thank me, and, if you did, you wouldn't mean it. So don't say anything and just accept it as a random act of kindness made by a stranger you'll never know. Ra's eyes widened in shock and surprise. Get her something to eat and drink please. When she's done escort around the facility, Naruto ordered politely to the white sentinel. The green light on the sentinel blinked a couple of times, indicating that it was responding to Naruto's command. No restrictions, but I would recommend not going to the sister mountain. I'm sure our guest would not want to cross that bridge again. Naruto then turned and walked out of the cafeteria silently, leaving a stunned Ra in his wake. The sound of something dropping onto the table shook Ra from her temporary stupor. She looked over towards the sound and saw a plate of food sitting in front of her. She sighed deeply when she saw the contents of the meal. Bird. XXXXX. What is the purpose of this meeting? Light proclaimed as the purple metal ball floated into a large room on the Forerunner home world. You know why this meeting has been called Moonlight? An orange monitor said as it floated up to light. There were numerous other monitors of varying colors, but for the most part they are blue, floating inside the massive meeting room. Yes, it has become very self-evident that you have been keeping the creator in the dark. Another monitor exclaimed. In the dark? In the dark about what exactly? Light asked. It's about protocols 111, 112, 401, and 962 which was put into effect when the creator was incapacitated. A monitor known as 343 Guilty Spark explained. Always the one that follows the rules by the book. They state very clearly that. The orange monitor went on to say. I know exactly what the protocols say, abject testament. Light responded. Then why haven't you explained at least protocol 111 and 112 to the creator? It pertains directly to him. Abject pushed. He deserves to know. Spark chimed. If the creator deserves to know, then why wasn't it outlined in the archive files, or made known directly to him? Light questioned. What are you stating? Abject pushed. There's a reason that this information was given to us and not the creator. I don't know why, but there has to be a reason for such information to not be directed towards him. Light explained. The room of monitors stayed quiet for a moment, as if pondering Light's words. Still, that doesn't mean this information isn't better in the creator's hands than our own. Abject replied. Then how do you explain the creators search for information within the many research facilities scattered across the galaxy? Does anyone here know what he's searching for? Light asked, as if trying to move the argument to another topic. A silence swept over the room as a sudden realization sunk in. Exactly. The information that he's been searching for has been locked out of our data banks. It's obvious that our earlier creators kept this information from us. Did they not trust us with the information? Abject asked out loud. No, I don't think that's the reason behind their secrecy. Light said. Then what other reason is there? What information could be hidden within these line of terminals? Abject exclaimed, a tint of red flashing in his orange eye. It's clear that the Ancient Ones did not trust us. Indeed, they lied to us. Their own creations. A multitude of other monitors threw in their 2 cents as the room began to be overwhelmed with shouts of anger, fear, and frustration. What was so important that needed to be locked away from them? For the monitors, which were originally created to house a multitude of information pertaining to their installations, or facilities, it was maddening knowing that there could very well be secret information sealed away somewhere inside their installation, and they couldn't reach it. Everyone calm down, Light said, but the uproar that he started was only escalating. I said everyone calm down. All of the monitors immediately quieted down and turned their attention to the purple floating ball at the center of the room. What the creator has told me is that the research involves the last hero of the heavens. This statement immediately silenced any fears or worries that may have clouded the minds of the monitors. During the Flood Forerunner War, the Flood was small at first, but over time the Flood outnumbered the Forerunners greatly. In an attempt to bolster their ranks, Naruto's ancestors created the monitors in the hopes that it would turn the tide in their favor. But as the war dragged on, and the Forerunners' numbers began to dwindle, the monitors began to be seen as simple tools for the war, and were treated as such. Sent on missions deemed too dangerous for a Forerunner commander, monitors were often sacrificed to save the lives of other Forerunners. But, the hero of the heavens changed that view and actually treated them like equals. Like brothers in arms. Respect for the hero amongst the monitors grew, and slowly, ties of friendship began to sprout. So, when the hero of the heavens is ever mentioned among the monitors, an immense amount of respect and seriousness is brought forth. Are you sure that the information he is looking for was placed there by the hero? Abject asked. Light nodded. This is only what Naruto has told him thus far. Meaning even this information must be taken with a grain of salt. Then if the hero is involved, then there is nothing to fear. Agreed. The hero wouldn't hold back any information from us unless it was important. Spark said. The other monitors in the room all seemed to agree with Abject and Spark to some degree. So, back to my main theory, Light said, getting the attention of the others. The creators, predecessors must have kept this information from him for a reason, just as the hero had kept information from us. Yes, we know that, but how do we know that this information is sound? The 4 protocols came from an unknown source, correct? Abject questioned. The information did indeed come from an unknown source, but it was only triggered after the creator was inside the downloader. Assuming this to be true, there are 2 clear possibilities with the highest chance of being correct. Spark theorized. The first is that a protocol was put into place before the activation of the halos that foresaw the coming of another being with the blood, or at least some DNA, of a Forerunner. That scenario seems unlikely, but still very plausible. Abject judged. The second scenario is that there is an unknown entity that was left behind by the original creators for an unknown purpose. This said entity is using the current creator to rebuild the fragmented Forerunner infrastructure, and possibly more. Spark stated. An unknown entity. What are you talking about? One of the other monitors asked. Indeed, that scenario seems just as unlikely as the first. Abject said. I said those are the theories with the highest possibilities of being accurate. Whether or not they are true remains to be proven. Spark said. Several seconds passed as many of the other monitors, Abject and Light included, began to run through many of the possibilities, but all the monitors came to the same conclusion as Spark. So, what should we do? Based on these 2 theories, we should all run a scan on our separate installations to see if there are any abnormalities in our separate facilities. Once this is completed, we should continue our search by checking each individual terminal. Abject suggested. But that would take an enormous amount of time. Is this a good plan of action? Light asked. We are only doing this because we are unable to ask the creator for assistance. Like you said, we are on our own in this endeavor. If we are to find the reasoning behind these unknown protocols without the creator knowing, then this is the only way. Abject retorted. It was clear to Light that Abject truly wanted to tell Naruto, but from what Light could gather, the young Forerunner didn't need this looming over his head as well. If this is the only way, then so be it. Light said. Then it is agreed. We will search for the source of this information and reconvene here once our individual tasks have been completed. Abject announced. XXXXX. Ra walked down the hallway, adorning her now repaired armor, with her helmet in her hand. A disgruntled expression was covering her face as she simply walked blindly through the hallway. So don't say anything and just accept it as a random act of kindness made by a stranger you'll never know. That sentence continued to play over and over inside her mind as she stopped at a dead end. The young Sanghaili turned and began to walk down the hallway where she came from with no set destination in mind. The white sentinel followed her silently, never making any noise besides the soft hum of its motors that kept it hovering. Finally, she shouted and slammed her fist into the metal wall in pure frustration. A small wave of dust erupted from the wall and flew past her. Ra began to grind her teeth as the image of the fake appeared in her mind. What's with him? To simply repair my armor, give me food, to save my life. Ra thought as the image of him grabbing her hand right before she fell to her death flashed into her mind. Gah! Ra exclaimed before slamming her other fist into the wall. The wall angrily replied in kind and a wave of pain was sent shooting up the Sanghaili's arm. Ra ignored the pain as she turned and began walking down the hallway. The medical sentinel silently began healing her sore arm as it followed the now angry Sanghaili down the hall. It's like he doesn't even acknowledge my existence. Ra shouted to no one in particular. Treating me as if I'm some pet that he's simply keeping around because he's feeling so inclined. Ra stopped and turned to the white sentinel in anger, her knuckles showing that she was definitely clenching them. By this time the sentinel had already completed healing her minor injury from slamming her fist into the wall and was silently staring at her. You were ordered to take me anywhere I pleased, correct? Ra said more than asked. The green light that was the sentinel's, I blinked a few times. Ra took this as a confirmation and continued her line of thinking. Take me to him. The sentinel slightly tilted its body to the side, as if asking her to restate her request. You heard me, take me to him. We need to talk. XXXXX. So this is Dolorous, Bress said aloud as he landed onto the ground next to Hyas after exiting one of the gold phantoms. The loud chirping of birds and mind-numbing buzz of the native insects almost made it hard for Hyas to hear his friend and fellow soldier. Have you never been here before? It's basic training for anyone in the Spec Ops. Hyas replied. Bress looked over the massive open field that was only made possible by the various equipment that the heretics have available to them. I completed my jungle training on Pollock. Didn't you read that in my records? Bress asked as the two soldiers approached the small heretic outpost at the center of the grassy field. Nope, I trusted you enough to believe that you were competent enough in jungle warfare to support any mission that may be thrown at us. Hyas said, earning a grin from Bress. If there's one thing that anyone should know about Bress is that his ego can sometimes get the better of him. On several missions Bress almost got himself, and more importantly his men, killed because he thought he could take on more than he could handle. While Hyas had gotten onto him for his reckless behavior, Bress still maintains an air of superiority over his fellow brothers in arms. Hyas's command tree is fairly confusing at the moment because of old positions changing into new ones. While Polaris knew his place in the Burning Legion well, but Bress and Ugana continued to bicker about who was of higher rank. Bress argued that since he was Hyas's second before Operation Purify, he retained his second-in-command position, but Ugana countered Bress's argument by stating that he was all of their commander at one point and refused to accept any position lower that second command. When confronted about this topic, Hyas would simply smile and move along with life. In truth, Hyas rather liked the idea of a competition for his second-in-command position. If anything, it brought forth an even more fierce loyalty towards him from his commanders that wasn't always under his command. At least from Ugana. I'm just wondering where our ships can land. It's not like there's an open dock here. Hyas said as they stopped at the door of the heretic building. The building was shaped like a spire that protruded up into the air for about 3 stories. Its colors represented the classic heretic splashes of ruby red with metallic gold streaks running up the side. The commander of the Burning Legion pressed a button on the side of the door after waiting a couple of seconds for any response. Hello, this is Hyas from the Burning Legion. Is there anyone there? A minute passed before there was any response from inside the base. Enter, came a stern voice from over the intercom. The 2 Burning Legion soldiers looked at one another with a confused look on their faces before the door unlocked itself, allowing them to enter. Hyas and Bress entered through the door and soon found themselves in a short narrow hall, barely large enough to fit 2 Sanghailis shoulder to shoulder. The door behind them closed as soon as they entered the hallway and the lights inside the hallway lit up as they moved along. As they reached the end of the hallway the door opened up to reveal a round dark room only lit by several computer screens. The room had 2 separate areas that was separated by a few steps at the center of the room. Computer screens lined the ground area with each screen being accompanied by a soldier with the same color armor as the building itself. At the center of the room sat, on an elevated area, a platform with a chair and another table much like Hyas had on his ship that projected holograms when need be. Well, are you going to just stand there and stand around like complete retards? A voice exclaimed from the platform. At the top of the platform sat an older Sanghaili with faded skin and an even older set of armor. Anyone could tell, even at this distance, that this man had seen many things and fought in many battles beyond the stars. Or are you going to come up here and talk? Rather aggressive, Bress whispered to Hyas, who chuckled softly in response. So you're the great commander of the Burning Legion, Hyas Graindom. The Sanghaili stated as said Sanghaili approached the old soldier after having climbed up to the elevated platform. The obvious commander of the outpost turned his cold gaze over to Bress, who twitched in response to the attention he was now getting. And I take it this is your lackey. Bress looked like he was about to retort before he got a look from Hyas that immediately put a damper on any sort of retaliation from the agitated soldier. This earned a grin from the old commander as he leaned back into the giant chair and crossed his fingers. His gaze returned to Hyas, agitation clear in his facial features. It's good to see that you keep your men in check, at the very least. The old man said. This man was making it very hard for Hyas to keep his calm demeanor, but he has had plenty of practice while in the Covenant. How else would someone think he became the commander of the Burning Legion? It's rather unfair that you know my name. You are, Hyas asked as politely as possible. The old soldier scoffed before leaning onto the hologram table. So you haven't heard of me. My name used to send crippling fear through the spines of our enemies. People used to call me the Phantom of the Deep because of my accomplishments when fighting an enemy in the unexplored parts of our galaxy. The Phantom of the Deep, said in a very egotistical fashion. Hyas looked at the man for a couple of moments before nodding his head. The leader of the Burning Legion knew exactly who this man was as he wrote the book on deep space warfare. When out of reach of any reinforcements, and far from all resupply points, this man made do with what was available to him in any given location. He and his men were some of the toughest soldiers known to the Covenant. To have them on the side of the heretics is a huge blow to the Covenant, but Hyas never knew that he turned coat. No, I haven't. Not that I would care about an old man like you. Bress retorted in anger. Hyas sighed deeply as he looked over at his fuming friend. Well, let me reiterate for you. I'm Bel, Norian, and I single-handedly conquered the Jiralhanai, expanded the borders of the Covenant by 30%, and was one of the highest-ranking officers in the Covenant fleet for more than 20 years. Bel said with irritation at Bress's lack of military knowledge. Is all of your subordinates this illiterate? Hey, Bress began to say, but Hyas put an arm in front of him, effectively stopping him from saying anything. No, they aren't, but I also don't appreciate you talking down to my men like this, Commander Bel. Hyas said in a polite, but stern, voice. Bel looked at Hyas for a moment, as if gauging his resolve. After a couple seconds of this staring contest, Bel finally leaned back into his chair before responding. As a good commander should be. He doesn't take shit from anyone who talks down to him, or his men. Bel said before laying his arms over the armrests of his chair. But let me tell you one thing. I know exactly who you are, and what you've accomplished. I've seen everything under the red tape, Commander Hyas, and you've done some pretty unsightly things before you became the commander of the Burning Legion. Hyas's breath caught in his throat as he heard his accusation. So, Bel knew about what he's done in the past. I guess it's not that unimaginable to believe. Seeing as how I fought under him a few times, but not even Ugana knows of my past, how could he? Bress looked over at Hyas, confusion evident in his eyes. Now, those secrets are not mine to tell, but if you are anything like you used to be then I expect great things from you in this war. Bel said as he stood from his chair. He was tall, taller than most Sangheili at the very least, and still fairly muscular for his age. Hyas twitched, making Bress furrow a brow in even more confusion. What did Hyas do in his past that made him so uncomfortable? In truth, Hyas wanted his past buried in the depths of his mind. Like a bad dream that he was unfortunately a part of, but it looks like even that can come back to haunt him. I don't respect you, not yet. You took your leadership by rising up against your past commander, and thus, not earning your position through conventional means. You'll need to prove to me that are a capable leader when the time calls for just that. A commendable leader, Bel said as he put his face inches away from Hyas's. Said commander stared back the older man, unmoving in his conviction. He knew that his men trusted and respected him. There was nothing Bel could say that would change this fact. At least he thought. Now, Bel said as he moved away from the two younger soldiers. I've received orders from Voro that gave you clearance to stay here for the time being. That is correct. Voro told us to come to rest and resupply for a while. Do you have anywhere we can land our ships? Hyas asked. I didn't see any docks when we were approaching from orbit. Bress said offhandedly. The old commander laughed at Bress's words, but stopped after coughing a few times. Well, I guess our camouflage is still working then, huh boys? Bel said, earning a flurry of, yes sirs, from the men that surrounded them. Camouflage? Bress asked. The old commander chuckled as he beckoned the two Burning Legion soldiers over to the table. You see, our entire facility is underground, except for a few observation points like this one. Bel explained as an image of a massive complex popped up in front of them. The complex easily allowed Hyas's small fleet to fit into the docking area. We have about 5,000 soldiers here in order to defend this secret facility from any possible Covenant assault. It's amazing that you guys have managed to build all of this underground. Bress said in amazement, and more importantly so deep in Covenant-controlled space. How have you not been found? Hyas asked. This facility is built over a massive Forerunner object deep beneath the surface. This object has projected a field around this area that dampers any scans that comes over us, effectively making this facility invisible to any orbital scans. Bel explained. Massive Forerunner object? Hyas asked. Bel nodded and pointed to the bottom part of the hologram. We have been tunneling beneath our facility in hopes of finding it, but the rock beneath us is extremely hard, and it has been slow going. At least we are invisible for the time being. Bress said. While the Forerunner object is our saving grace in terms of stealth, it's a double-edged sword. Bel went on to say. How so? Hyas questioned. We are also unable to use our long-range scanners as well. Meaning we'll never know if there is an attack until it's within sight. Bel said as he moved the hologram down to where he believed the object was. It's strange, the object only stops long-range scanners from working, but electronics, communications, short-range scanners, you name it continue to work. It's almost as if this object was hiding from something. I wonder what it was used for. Hayes said aloud. That's what we have been trying to find out, but after much contemplation we have just given up on guessing and simply enjoyed what it has provided for us. For now, we won't get any answers until we reach it. Vel said with a deep sigh as he leaned against the table. It was clear that the old commander had put a lot of thought into what the object beneath them was. That's true. For now we have other issues to attend to, Hayes said, steering the conversation away from the desolate Forerunner object. Indeed, we do. A few phantoms will move into position to guide your ships into dock. Just follow their instructions and your ships will be in dock within the hour. Vel said. Understood. Thank you for your hospitality, Hayes said with a bow. Bress followed suit after his commander gave him a look of, you better do this or you'll pay for it later. I'll meet you in the docks, Vel said as the two Burning Legion soldiers left the observation post into their ship. 4XX. Ra continued to follow the White Sentinel through the winding hallways of Dark Soar. The young Sangheili soldier hadn't realized how long, or how far, she had been walking until the two had traveled up 2 flights of stairs, and an elevator ride to a floor that went unnoticed by Ra. And her reason for being so unusually absent-minded? The fake. She had just asked the Sentinel to lead her to the location of the creator with the motive of talking, but what would she ask? How would she begin a conversation with him? She continued to rack her brain for ideas for what she was going to say, but then the Sentinel stopped in front of a door near the end of a long hall. The floating metal drone floated out of the way of the door that lay behind it. Is this the place? Ra asked the medical Sentinel. Her answer came with the opening of the door that the Sentinel had moved out of the way of, revealing a bright light that obscured her vision. When her vision adjusted to the light, a magnificent sight was presented to the stunned Sangheili. The room is square with 3 of the walls, including the ceiling, being the semi-transparent glass like in halls, revealing that the room protruded out of the mountain and over the cliff, giving the occupants a fantastic view of the mountains on all sides except one. The sun was setting over the tops of the mountains and shining into the hallway from which she came. But then Ra's focus finally landed onto the other occupant of the room. A blue light could be seen glowing from the back of his neck. Fake, Ra said. The cloaked figure turned his body to face his new guest, only to see her staring at him with an intense expression plastered on her face. A mix of anger, confusion, and solitude are the major emotions that Naruto could see on Ra's face. The female Sangheili slowly put on her helmet and grabbed her sword from its holster. Ra quickly released the energy from the blade and positioned herself in a fighting stance. Fight me, XXXXX. And look everyone, I'm sorry that this chapter has taken so long to write up, but since my last chapter I've been busy. And when I mean busy, I mean busy. Most of this business was because of school. I had more than a fair amount of papers due by the end of the semester, which piled on the amount of stress that I was feeling. I made a vow that I would pick this story up once I was let out for summer break, but as soon as summer break actually hit I was out of town for 2 weeks, meaning that I couldn't up this story until a week ago. So, as far as I know, I'm going to be uploading this story more often. Especially now that it's summer break. While I still have summer courses, work, and my father still has health problems, I'll do my best to upload chapters more frequently. Next time, if I know that it'll be a while until I upload the next chapter, I will create a proxy chapter letting everyone know. And, as always, thanks for reading my story, laughing face.